I want to get y'all opinion on something really quick. So there's all of this conversation around Drake and Iceman. I think I was scrolling past the NFR podcast, and they had like a quote about it being like a highly anticipated album and that sort of thing. And it brought me to this thought process that it's been several weeks. He's announced it, um, and it's been announced for a while, right? Like Iceman has been on ice for quite some time, to the point that we've watched Iceman miss his opportunity of seasons, right? So it's gone from ice like ice cold to ice like diamonds, literally. Like the theme of it has changed. And one of the things that I didn't really notice is anyone talking about, does Drake actually have the ability to release an album with a lawsuit pending? Right? So let's not forget, like, the Sexy Songs for You joint is a him and P&D album. So it's a collab album, and it was released through Sony. So I'm not really sure how he will be capacitated to release an album until he were to let go of what is happening with UMG, right? And it made me think about the fact that he's still going back and forth with them about this, right? Like, he's gone ahead and he's appealed the decision. So he is extending this discussion around entitlements and wrongdoings and so on and so forth. And of course, people are on both sides of the pendulum with the discussion of whether or not he was disparaged in this rap battle, and if this is a defamatory or defamation case, right? Is this a reasonable discussion? And of course, we've had our discussions that, just as, like, I understand what he's saying, and I definitely see how it can be uncomfortable, but there's also a reality where there's a lot of people that's anticipating this album, and most of us are expecting him to sell pretty well. Now, here is the thing that I got to look more into is, what does his popularity mean monetarily, right? So this is not to deny that he doesn't, do the touring, and he doesn't do well for tours and that, but he was in a deal that almost seemed to require that, which is an interesting thing. And when I look at the horizon of his label mate, Miss Nicki Minaj, right? Like, she's going through this thing. She wasn't able to release her album. A lot of people are blaming it on, her incident with Cardi, but I don't think that it's that. I think that the labels are doing an ROI, right? Return of investment, and, reevaluated what she was doing. And she talked about people stealing from her. There is a clip in Cardi's recent interview or podcast appearance where she's talking about how much money you spend on certain things. And if you're not watching these accounts, the money can slip through your fingers really fast. Let me see if I can find
last year you were spending like $3 million a month or something like that on your outgoings, on keeping Cardi B and the family going. Was that true?
It will be like a month that is like, wow, I spent so much money. But then some months are like lower than others. It was like a year that I was like, why am I spending $1 million on transportation a year? Like driving transportation, not planes or nothing, like just driving transportation. And that's just because it's like, sometimes like you don't even be having talks with your accountant every week. You just be like, oh, whatever. Like, it's like, I could see what I got going on in my credit card, but there's just so many little accounts that you have that is like, I'm not always keeping up with it. Keep up with every single account that you have.
And when Nicki talked about hairstylists stealing from her and that sort of thing, I think what happened in that case is that she went back to her label, because I think she really did want to release an album, especially with all the hype around Cardi and so on and so forth, right? Like, there was that momentum, that drive to show back up in the space. And when she went back, I think that she had been working on investments. Like, she's working in reverse, right? So she's going to the label and they are giving her an advance, and then she's going and getting that money back, walking the line of greatness, right? Selling out stuff and putting out albums, putting up numbers. She goes out, she talks her shit, she goes back into hiding until she's ready to do it again. And I think that this was the last time. And I said this before because there's been a lot of conversation around her money not being what her money used to be. And this is where we're seeing the emergence of these lawsuits, right? These claims and whatnot, where people are asking for their money and creditors are not being paid and so on and so on. Because I think that she is living like the typical American right now. And not in the sense that she doesn't have the grandiose lifestyle, but that she's living financially just like the rest of us, right? Kind of like on this paycheck to paycheck kind of thing. And in reflecting on what's happening to her, I started to think about Drake, who everybody would argue is significantly bigger, not necessarily in popularity, but monetarily, yeah, for sure. And it's this presumption that he just has so much more. And not only is his purchasing power more, his capacity to recoup is also more. Does that make sense? And so, in this instance where he is actually fighting with his record label, that stood out to me a little bit. And I say that because if you are indeed the talent, if you are the $1 billion product, why would you stay with that record label and you felt like they played you? That's the one thing that just doesn't sit well with me. Am I wrong for that? Does anybody else feel like that? Because it baffles me that he would continue this back and forth, this argument, and people are saying like, "Oh, he's worth this, he's worth that," but we're discounting that he is debating with the record label about an upcoming contract which would be valuated a certain way and would warrant a specific sort of advance on the back end promise that he would have to fulfill. And I started to ponder, do you think that Drake might not have the liquid that he needs left? Like, is this the early signs of you might have built a lifestyle based on like your overtime check and not your typical income? I'm really wondering about that. And I think I'm going to revisit this because this is an important difference to me between what Rock Nation was versus what Young Money was. There was so much back and forth about that group, right? Like Rock Nation, I would have to say, like Jay-Z and Rock Nation is equivalent to Tom Brady and the Patriots, if you ask me. And Young Money came in like Eli and the New York Giants. And it was those two rings that they was able to get. And like you respect it, right? Like I would never discount their championship. But when it's all said and done, there's something about Tom Brady where that don't quite change the legacy. Same with Jay. And so I've been pondering this and thinking about it. And I'm going to do some digging and I'll come back and do a full like review. Hopefully I could do it between tonight and tomorrow before school starts back up because I'll miss it and be annoyed that I don't get it done. But tell me what you think. I think that Drake is in an interesting spot and he is trying to negotiate because the money that he will need to maintain his lifestyle, I don't think that he can afford for UMG to not match a certain amount. And the level of depreciation that he hit post battle. But the tough part is that depreciation happens naturally in most cases of music too. And I just wonder, somebody was talking about Drake having a rap museum like in his crib.
Drake ever give you back that pink fur?
Drake, nah. Drake has it in his museum, but if I need it, I could get it. It's one of them shits where he got a couple of my jackets, but I told him my shits just be collecting dust in the crib. So I'm like, yo, he got a museum in his crib, so he got it in his museum, and I told him if I need it, it'll be on standby if I need it. But I'd rather the people come through to his house and see
And
it.
I'm like, do you know how much money he's probably wasting maintaining rap artifacts? And there's no ROI on that. There's no return. It doesn't make you any money. It's just a significant expense. And this is equivalent, like what's happening with Drake and Nicki. And I'm not saying that this is a fact. This is my presumption. Again, this is equivalent to a typical American going to work and not getting their last paycheck. And I think that that's what we're looking at now. So I really would like to know what your thoughts are on the potential release of Iceman, right? What that looks like, and if that even comes to fruition until this appeal is done with UMG. Yeah, because we watched Iceman thaw out, like, the whole winter went by. He probably thought that it would have been settled and that UMG would have folded by now, and they did. And the tension continues to increase. And not to be like a jerk or nothing, but he gambles. And it's like, if he tried to call a bluff, but the thing about calling a bluff is that you got to be able to say no, you got to be able to walk away. And his inability to walk away is making me think, what if he messed up? What if him, Nicki, and even, and respectfully, like, everybody talks about Jay-Z being a terrible person, but Jay-Z bailed out Lil Wayne when his tax situation came up. Lil Wayne sold their masters, and that's how they all ended up at Republic in the first place, because that was a whole thing. And like, here we are. And I'm not saying that he's broke. I would never say, I don't think that his situation is as tough as Nicki's is. I think that he also is fortunate enough to come from a family that has assets too. So even if he were to like fall from grace, it won't look quite like Nicki if she were to fall from grace, because there's no other people of established wealth in her dynamic versus his dynamic, where I'm sure that they've had, financial advising and that sort of thing too. But his lifestyle and that perception of being the number one guy fractures pretty hard. But yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. But tell me what you think, and leave your comment, because I'm gonna go full circle on this one, and I want to have a real discussion about it. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.